When we do our jobs, we often respond to the question, "Why do you do it?" with, "I'm just doing my job, I'm just following orders." But we're naturally curious creatures, and we often can't help but ask, why? But are some things just not worth knowing? Have you ever had a job where you decided you just didn't want to know the why? Hey there, baby cakes. Yeah, I know you don't like it when I call you that, but give me a break, it's screwed up out here. The brass have got this place locked down tight, so I don't know when I'll be able to write to you again. There's no phones, no internet, not a packet of data gets off this rock. But they never seem to consider the pilot taking the old staff home being willing to take a bribe in exchange for posting a letter. I guess nobody expects you to put pen to paper these days anymore, huh? Anyway, that's their loss and our gain. Basically, I had the worst first day of work ever. Legit. Before I get too far along here, I should probably mention, I ain't in Bermuda like I said I was. Yeah, I can see you now. You lied to me, you a-hole. Just go ahead and call me all the names you got. I'll probably deserve it eventually. But the truth is, I actually thought I was going to Bermuda too. Right up until I had my cheeks on the plane seat. Then this CIA spook comes up to me, gets right up in my face. His breath smelled of Jack Daniels and fruity vapes. And he says to me, "You've been reassigned." And he hands me this file and gets off the plane. Before I had time to get it together and have a read, the plane was on the damn runway and starting the engines. Wherever I was going, there was no opting out now. When we got up in the air, and I got my ears popped out, sons of bees didn't even give me something to suck en route. I worked up the guts to read the file. The part of me you always say reminds you of a kid was hoping that where I'd be reassigned would at least have a few nice bars. I swear, I was tempted to roll on into the cockpit and demand they turn this bird around. The file said I was headed to some tiny island somewhere in the Pacific, which, by the way, isn't on any map, and is probably popping up on those places they got censored on Google Earth YouTube videos. One thing's for sure, there'd be no comedy clubs or Hershey bars there. Hell, we'd be lucky if we weren't stuck in wartime rations. I'm kind of embarrassed to say it, but I was feeling dreadful sorry for myself, right up until the plane settled down on a runway so damn small, I thought we were going to shoot right off the other end. When I got off and took it all in, I noticed it was good weather. That's something. But I could see right over to the other side of the island. The entire place was hardly 3 miles long and just about 2 wide. The runway was the only really open space. Everything else was bushes, trees, and run-down old buildings. It's like the place could only come up with 2 things, leaves and rust. This ruffled old sergeant, with a face like a plank, moseyed on up to me and brought me over to some shelter out of the way. I tried to talk to him, but there was more conversation from Grandma when she was in a coma than there was out of this guy. I was jet-lagged as hell, so I gave up trying pretty quick. He just kept saying we were waiting for the others. Over the next few hours or so, 3 more planes touched down and dumped off another confused member of either the military or the CIA. We all gathered in this shelter. Nobody was really talking. Man. The atmosphere was heavier than my head after 4 tequilas. When the last guy landed, old Sergeant Grimface beside me gets up and finally decides he knows how to talk. "I'm Sergeant Dustin Weiss. Most folk call me Dusty." He then turns to the girl on my right. "You're with my tech, Julie? Then the guy on my left. You're with my intel specialist, Fan?" Then he turns his wrinkly old face to the girl next to him. "And you're with Tony? Who's on logistics? Now on you go. He pointed at a group of 3 tired-looking folks who just came out of nowhere. They sort of smiled over at us in a way which gave me the heebie-jeebies. The 3 new guys went over to the old guys, looking like they'd rather be jumping in the shark tank. And I don't blame them. But by then, I was crapping it, thinking about why I was the only one not given a minder. The answer came too quick for my liking. You're with me, son. You're on security. Trust my luck to end up with the guy who doesn't look like he knew how to laugh. It's like that time I ended up tenting with your Uncle Charlie back when we went camping in the Appalachians. The guy could only talk about cryptocurrency and Elon Musk. I'm telling you, after 10 minutes with Dusty, I was ready to sign up to a week-long, all-expenses-paid cruise with Charlie. You'll be working nights, he told me, as we walked a path overgrown by what I was scared was some poison plant or man-eating vines or something. At this point I was so tired, I grew some sleepy balls and tried to get some info. Where's here, Sarge? Never you mind. Everything's classified from the grass to the latrines. You got assigned here because you're tough, not because you're nosy. We clear? Crystal. There's no use talking to these old guys. They won't crack. I just had to get over the fact that literally everything was on a need-to-know basis. That was one thing, but I couldn't help but wonder why, if this place was such an important asset, why was it in such a state? Surely if something's so important, you'd try and keep the vines from growing through the window panes and the roof from caving in. We came off the path and came out into what looked like a miniature town. A rusty sign said Main Street, and the tattered posters seemed to be from the 70s. There were even a few classic cars parked on the pavement, almost like they were just for decoration. There was a rustic-looking old grocery store, a bowling alley, a cinema and theatre, a quaint little old bar, and a few other places. Also, everything was on the edge of collapse at any moment. Most of the windows were broken. There were holes in the roof. Paint was peeling, wood was rotting. It was a mess. There was something that didn't fit, though. Outside some of the buildings were what looked like modern tech. Computer screens and cameras all stacked up in these weatherproof boxes. I remember things like it from the field techs in Iraq. Then behind everything was this busted old billboard, which must have been neon at some point, but now it was just a shattered outline. Welcome to Blitz, it said. First rule of Blitz life, Dusty said. Nobody enters any buildings along Main Street during daylight hours, and only security is authorized at night. No exceptions. All staff are authorized to walk up and down the road between both pavements during daylight hours. During the hours of darkness, strictly security only. Who lived here, sir? I asked, fully expecting not to get an answer. But he surprised me. U.S. military. This rock was a small outpost in the Pacific theater of World War II. After that, it was a permanent station. About 400 servicemen and their families called Blitz their home, and they made a proper little town out of it. It stayed like this until the island was evacuated. What happened? I pushed. Classified. Yes, sir. I knew better than to push my luck. In addition to our primary mission here, we operate a live listening post intercepting communications from the Chinese and North Koreans. He pointed at a large satellite dish poking out of the trees. We've even directly tapped the undersea internet cable running through the Pacific. He smiled for the first time when he said this. I wish he hadn't. Made the guy look all the more like Treebeard from Lord of the Rings. What's our primary mission, sir? I asked. Classified, he said flatly. Outside, I said, yes, sir. Inside, I said, God damn it. Who's running the main mission then, sir? I inquired. Me, and after tonight, you will be. Then will I be briefed on what the mission is? No. At this point, I was so done with this guy, but I must have done a bad job of hiding it, because he went on, I get it, son, it's frustrating. But I ain't hiding nothing from you for fun. I don't know myself. I only know the how, not the why. And that's what I'll be teaching you. I followed Dusty beyond the edge of Blitz, through another forested pathway and into what looked like a bombed-out kids' play park. The rusting climbing frames and slides had been swept to the side, and some robust-looking military shelters had been erected. We usually only used those things for temporary deployment, but looking at how patchy and worn they were, you could tell the place had been up and running for years. "Home base?" Dusty said. We walked on past the others being shown around their quarters. Dusty brought me up to one of them, labelled security. "This is your bunk, son," he explained, opening the door. Inside was compact. It reminded me of the dorm I lived in when I was at college. So damn small your bed's pillow was practically lying on the toilet seat. I squeezed in after him. "Here's your gear." He pointed to a rack attached to one wall, and he told me about each thing hanging off of it. Chargeable flashlight, multi-pocket utility vest, and a fold-up broom. "Sorry, sir? That's our kit?" I couldn't swallow it. "Folded-up brooms? Who'd that punk think he is? I'm a soldier, not a janitor. Where is the bulletproof vest, fire-resistant fatigues, helmets and radios? And not a gun in sight. Not even a single goddamn sidearm." Clearly my tone wasn't to Woodface's liking, because he rounded on me like you did on Tyler when he drew over our bedroom wall. He gets right up in my face. I was smelling his breath as he gave the eye. It was something old military vets have, the "I've seen stuff" look, and he looked right there like he'd seen it all. Twice. And I didn't know what the hell I was yapping about. He didn't have to say anything. I read him loud and clear. So he walks over to the corner and there's a small time-locked safe there. It was flashing the word "open" on its LCD screen. He pushed the button and the door popped. He took out a phone and a few other bits like a smartwatch and he pocketed them. "All electronic devices capable of any wireless communications, in here," he ordered. I gave my phone and my Bluetooth earbuds over and rooted through my luggage and handed him my laptop. "Arms out." I thought that was weird, but I stuck my arms out by my sides. He gets down and he searches me like we were at an airport in case I was holding out on him. Then he had a rummage through my suitcase too. When he was happy I wasn't keeping a GPS up my butthole, he put all my stuff in the safe and he shuts the door. The damn thing then popped up a date exactly 1 year from today. "You'll get your electronic devices back on the day your assignment ends. Communication silent zone. No calls, no internet, no TV." "Yes, sir," I said. Being stuck on this island was bad enough, but stuck without Netflix. This was going to be a long year. My bed was on the other side of the room. He then pointed out the window and showed me which mobile huts were the bathroom, the mess hall, and the provisions place. Others were operational, like an equipment parts shed and the place where all the spy gear was used. "Your first shift begins at 2300 hours. You should sleep until then." Then he just walks out the door and leaves me there. I crashed down on the bed. I didn't know what to think, and in fact I kind of forgot how to think. So much had happened and none of it had sunk in, and the oncoming freak out felt like it was about to hit, but at some point I must have drifted off. I felt like I barely had my eyes closed before I nearly hit the roof. Dusty came banging on the door. 2300 hours, he yelled in. I just about crapped myself and looked at my watch. It was just about 10 minutes away from starting the shift and I hadn't even woken up. A great first impression. So I jumped up and put on my gear. The utility vest had a surprising amount of stuff in its dozen or so pockets, and the fold-up broom clipped onto my belt. I stepped outside and there was Dusty, outfitted just like I was. "Check in the third pocket from the bottom, on the right," Dusty ordered, switching on his flashlight and scattering clouds of gross bugs. I ruffled about a bit, then pulled out a laminated bit of paper. "Your itinerary," It lays out in detail your duties throughout the night. I looked at the first paragraph. Number 1, the Blitz bowling alley. That's right. Come on. I followed behind him. The sound of frogs and grasshoppers were deafening, right up until we approached Blitz. Then there was silence. There wasn't a moon that night, so once we were clear of our home base, our 2 flashlights were the only light source. Oh, I'd be lying if I claimed I wasn't creeped out. I'm going to feel like a real jackass when the kids come into our room at night and say they shouldn't be scared of the dark. Oh, I can tell you, that dark was pretty damn scary. Do not, for any reason, turn off your flashlight once on Main Street during the hours of darkness, he told me. Why's that, sir? Sometimes they don't come back on again, and you don't want that. Now read your itinerary. I had a look at the paper in my hand. 1A. Wait for all clear signal to turn green. Dusty slapped his hand on top of one of the computer screens on the pavement. That one was in front of the Blitz bowling alley. The sign for it had half fallen off, so it only read, Blitz bowling all. At that moment, the screen was glowing a solid, crossing light red. Dusty leaned against a nearby dented streetlight and whistled absent-mindedly. I paced up and down like a worried hen. A barely audible click drew my attention back to the screen. It was solid green now. Itinerary, Dustin said. I looked down. 1B. Enter the building and immediately proceed to the waiting area. You first, princess, he said, gesturing to the door. Trying not to show the fact I was shaking in my boots, I stepped up on the pavement and shoved the door open. Inside, predictably, was an absolute hole. Bits of fallen roof everywhere, lights hanging by wires off the ceiling. God, it was a real death trap. You could barely see the old bowling alleys under the rubble. The one thing which stood out was one bowling ball, still sitting in the collecting area, waiting for someone to lift it and try for a strike for old time's sake. On the back of it, someone had painted in white, for luck. Dusty pushed past me. Waiting area, he reminded me, and walked over to the corner of the alley. There was a square section of empty floor, marked out by reflective tape. Don't leave this spot until the itinerary tells you to, he advised me. I looked at the next step. 1C. Wait for an object to move. Once an object has moved, wait until it comes to a complete stop. Then immediately go to the object and return it to its previous position. Then immediately return to the waiting area. Repeat this process for 6 movements. I had no idea what the heck that was about. Dusty told me to calm down and follow his lead. He said it could take a good while for the action to start and it was easy to miss. He taught me to move my flashlight in a certain figure-8 way to make sure I had the best chance of seeing anything move. So I stood there in that creepy place for the next few minutes waving a light around. Then there was a crunch and a scrape. I nearly turned and ran right then, straight out of the bowling alley. Hell, jumping in the sea and swimming home. Before I could panic, Dusty's hand caught my shoulder. Did you see it? He asked. The table over there, I told him. He nodded and told me to watch him. He briskly left the waiting area. I suppressed the urge to beg him not to leave me. He reached the table and pushed it back into the corner where it originally was, and then he came back. My heart was thumping so hard that Dusty commented on it. We started shining our lights around again. Seemingly just after I calmed down, another noise was heard. This time, Dusty replaced an old wooden vase back onto its feet. Then it was the flip-up lid of the dust-filled squashy machines. He shoved it back down. This kept happening for the next while. The gaps between the 5th and 6th movements felt like it was the longest. Dusty told me not to get complacent. The ones with the gaps are the ones you'll miss, he said. Eventually, there was the sound of a ball rolling. The for-luck ball was slowly making its way, unaided, back up the ball return system. Watching its utterly steady motion was unnerving. Finally, it came to a total stop, just a few feet from where I stood. You've seen me do it. You handle this one. At that point, I was thinking, yeah, I would choose the shark tank over this too. Terrified the ball would somehow tear off my arm, I put my hand on it. It felt cool and exactly like a bowling ball. I pushed it and it rolled. I walked for luck right back up to where I first saw it and stopped it there. Come on back now, Dusty called. I nearly sprinted back at full tilt. Not so bad, huh? He asked. What now, sir? Itinerary. I looked at the paper. 1D. Wait inside the waiting area for the sigil to form. Then erase the sigil. I looked at Dusty. What, sir? It works best when you listen for it. Dusty had us fall silent, and after some painfully slow moments, I heard the sound of a soft wind, but it sounded heavier than a wind, more like a sprinkling of something very fine. Then it stopped. That's it, Dusty said, and beckoned me to follow him. In the center of the building was a circle with a jagged line in the center. It was about 6 feet in diameter. I almost went down on my ass there and then. Where did that come from? I whispered, trying not to shake. Beats me. Our job's just to clean it up. That's what the broom's for. Following his lead, I unfolded it and swept away the markings. Not a moment too soon, we left the building. The next building started much the same. Wait for the green light and go in. This time it was the bar. Nathan's Tavern, it was called. Inside was almost empty save for the bar itself and an old jukebox. 2C. Take cover from the shooting. I just looked nonplussed at Dusty. You'll not soon forget this, but don't freak out, son. We waited behind the bar in a similar waiting area. Again, it took a while to start up, and it began with a whoosh. A strong wind came seemingly from the walls and stirred up dust into the air. Instead of forming into a choking cloud, it instead turned into the ghosts, I suppose, of people and bar furniture. Dusty holograms of drinkers sitting at tables just hovered there in the light beam of my flashlight. The itinerary said take cover, Dusty growled at me. He'd bent down and covered his head as if to protect it. I, slowly, not taking my eyes off the apparitions for a second, did the same. The moment I did, the scene moved. The dust people looked scared. Some were covering their mouths, others pointing at the door. One girl who was dancing on the table was so frightened she fell silently off it and vanished into dusty nothing. Then the room was filled with utterly silent flashes of weird light, as if shone through a coffee filter. Then all the dust people were lying down or bent over tables, as dead as the dust they were made of. Then it all just sort of dissolved. The dust rained back down onto the floor. My strength gave in, and I sat down on the floor. What the itinerary? Dustin insisted, his voice calm, even bored. Shaking vigorously now, I picked up the instructions. 2D. Wait inside the waiting area for the sigil to form, then erase the sigil. The same thing again? I asked him. He nodded. So I listened, heard the wind sound, and then got up. Sure enough, the bizarre sign was lying there, this time made up of broken wine bottles and beer glasses. I swept it up and went outside. I wish that was the only insane, unexplainable crap I had to go through. But in total, we went through 10 buildings with 10 horrors. And honestly, some of them, I can't even bring myself to talk about. But there is one that won't leave my head, and it was in the Blitz Theatre. After we went in and settled in the waiting area. 6C. Pull the lever when the child is stationary in the rig. The waiting area was 2 seats in the theatre's front row. It took this event nearly 20 minutes to start up. Must have been past 3 a.m. at that point. I don't remember. But then, lights from nowhere showed up and a show, I guess, began. The show was made up of little people, not more than 4 foot high, in masks. Oh, you'll not believe it. The masks showed us, me and you, the kids, Gramps and Nina and Paul. The play was absolutely screwed up. There was twisted sex scenes, defecation, wrist cutting. I was going to upchuck, but Dustin told me to check one of the pockets in the utility vest. Anti-nausea pills. He really did have me come prepared. But the worst bit was the end. The masked little thing that had our son's face on it lay down in what looked like an old school guillotine from the French Revolution. Then it all froze. It was more like a still photograph now than a play. Remember what the itinerary said? Dustin cut in. I nodded, all colour gone from my face. Don't let it spook you. I got up, left the waiting area, and walked towards the spectre of the guillotine. Then I noticed all the actors were staring directly at me. Their heads followed me as I moved. The silence was absolute. The 4 paces to the lever felt like a marathon, but I got there, scrunched up my face and tentatively reached out for it. It was solid, but I couldn't feel anything under my fingers. I chose not to focus on that and just pulled down. Without a noise, the blade sliced downwards and decapitated the thing, with my son's face on it. Blood streamed out of the stump and trickled out into the floor. It somehow formed the shape I'd seen 5 times that night already. Dustin gave me the nod. I unclipped the broom and attempted to remove the markings. I expected it to smudge, but the blood was actually some sort of dust, which seemed to evaporate on contact. When I was finished and glanced around, there was nobody to be seen in the theatre, save myself and Dusty. He got up, clasped me by the shoulder and said, "Good work, new blood. You're going to be perfect for this job." I hope I haven't scared you too badly, baby cakes, but I had to tell someone. What if I don't come back? I don't want to think about what will happen to me if I do it, whatever it is, wrong. I mean, I only have to do it every single night.